This is Hannah Burner from Giggly Squad. O-Pill is the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Let's be real, getting a birth control prescription is not always easy, and it's so much admin. In fact, about a third of women face barriers to access prescription birth control. Between scheduling appointments, missing work, class, or just trying to exist, it's a lot. But now O-Pill is putting birth control in our control. O-Pill is a daily birth control that's FDA approved, full prescription strength, and estrogen free, and 98% effective when used as directed. Grab it online or at most major retailers, no prescription or doctor's appointment needed. So if you're thinking about birth control, check out O-Pill to see if it's right for you. Use code GIGGLY for 25% off your first month of O-Pill at OPILL.com. That's code GIGGLY at OPILL.com. Birth control in your control. We love to see it.
Hello everyone and welcome back to How We're the podcast. You join us just after full time on a rather grey Saturday afternoon as Sunderland have just come off the back of a 2-0 defeat away at Turf Moor against Burnley in the second game of the Premier League season. You've got me, Jonny, in the host chair this weekend, and I'm trying not to make a habit of only hosting reaction pods to terrible losses. But alongside us, I have a man who's familiar to joining me in these post-match chats where everything's a little bit dour. So I've got the best of the Southwest. I've got Bomber on with us.
Oh, I like that introduction, Jonny. I like that introduction. And I assume you mean you're metaphoric in talking about your grey, gloomy skies, because in Gloucestershire the sun's out, it's 23 degrees, and other than the football, it's actually quite a nice day. So
could have done with a bit of that Turf Moor this afternoon, couldn't we?
Yeah. But yeah, I'm okay, mate. All things considered, obviously, just thrilled to be back speaking to you naturally.
I think that's going to be the high point of this pod. The company, and it's all downhill in the content. So we'll dive straight into it. Obviously, it's a disappointing result, and particularly to follow up such a brilliant opening weekend with such a damp squib of a performance. It's never going to get people's adrenaline flowing and get people excited. But if we go right back to the beginning of the game, I think obviously we were confident going into it. And you look at the lineups and the way that Burnley performed last week, and you're obviously probably feeling confident. And the way the game started, it could have been that confidence was completely justified, and we almost were 1-0 up pretty early on. Obviously, there was that free kick, which was, I think it was a free kick, wasn't it, that was played in towards the back post. Ballard heads it across, and then it drops to Mayenda, sort of 6-7 yards out, and you're thinking, right, that's it, 1-0. But he just, whatever it is that he's not quite set himself properly, whatever has contributed to it, he just snatches at it a little bit, doesn't he? And it's, an easy one for the keeper to hold. How important was that moment?
I mean, we could be sat here, I said to you before we went on air, we could be sat here talking about a different game if that goes in. And I think for every person that says that it's kind of flown at him and he hasn't had time to react to it, etc., there'll be another person, me included, who really thinks he should be doing better with that. I mean, okay, it has come at him relatively quickly. It's come at him. He's got the effort on target, but he's in a position where he should be expecting that ball to come back across to him. He's a striker. He should have that instinct to know, or at least anticipate that ball could be coming straight back to me, and I'm going to need to do something with it. And he's missed a couple of those chances in pre-season as well. He didn't really get his goal against West Ham was obviously fantastic, but during pre-season, I don't think I'm alone in saying that he kind of missed a few chances and really should have done better during pre-season. And I think that was just an extension of what we saw in pre-season, as I think the game felt really on the whole. But like you said, if that chance goes in, we're talking about a different game. Just to come back to what you were saying in your introduction, I think a lot of the fans, myself and yourself included, will be disappointed in that. Again, we were talking off air that you look at Burnley, who were bookies' favourites before game week 1 to finish bottom of the league. We've just come off the high of beating West Ham. and I'm sure we'll talk about that in context a little bit more, given that they were absolutely battered by Chelsea on Friday. And you probably expect to go to Burnley and pick something up. So to have not really Mayenda chance and Talby chance aside, you would expect to go to Burnley and get something, and we never really looked like we would get anything other than possibly a 0-0 draw. So yeah, disappointing, but like I said, we could be sat here buzzing about 6 points from the first two games had that Mayenda chance gone in. The only caveat, again, I would say, is that it was very early, and there was plenty of chance for if it did go in, for Burnley to get themselves back in the game and possibly still go on and win it. So, that's not going to be the be all and end all, but it is a bit of a sliding doors moment of the game. Definitely.
And another moment in the first half that obviously would have been huge in terms of impact on the game was when Dan Ballard goes down. Just one of those that looks innocuous on first view, and as well, he sort of just went up for a header, didn't he? And then as he lands, he's kind of maybe twinged something or tweaked something. Looked like his groin, didn't it? He was getting a lot of attention from the physio when he came on, and he was off for a good couple of minutes, I think, and then tried to come back on when he was called on by the ref, and immediately you could see just couldn't move freely and was straight back down on the deck, wasn't he? And obviously then that necessitated the change for Jensen Silt to come on. It's a shame that it's becoming something of a habit with Ballard for these sorts of injuries to crop up, and it always feels like it's just when he's starting to build up a head of steam. Yeah. So I massively feel for him. It must be so frustrating to be on a brilliant run of form and getting picked and starting games at the highest level, and to have it, obviously we don't know as we sit here and record what the severity of that injury is, but it must be so frustrating to have it yanked away from you like that. And while I don't think it made us look terrible in the immediate aftermath or anything, as if we were all at sea, I do think that's probably contributed to at least some of the, defensive vulnerabilities that we've seen in the game.
Yeah, I think so. You plan all week for this game. In the Premier League, you pretty much go weekend to weekend. There's not an awful lot of Saturday, Tuesday, so you do have more time to prepare. So I'm sure the Priest has had every training session with this in mind, with Ballard starting with Alderete, and what they're going to do and the patterns of play, and then all of a sudden, within the first, 10 minutes of the game or so, that's all out the window. And whilst Jensen Silt has been pretty good for us in pre-season, let's not forget that he also went off injured against West Ham, looked like he jarred his back, so he was probably on the bench because he wasn't also fully fit. I just find it was interesting that Ballard started, given that the Roker Report group chat was flying around that there may be a fitness issue with Dan Ballard. So, I mean, it was obviously not severe enough for him to not start the game, or it was deemed not severe enough over Jensen Silt. But yeah, just to come back to your point, it is a shame because he's such a good player, and when he's at his best, he's so influential for us at the back. But just when we think we're about to see the best of Dan Ballard, he has some sort of injury setback. And again, whilst I appreciate Jensen Silt probably wasn't fully fit, given that he went off last weekend, you could see there was a difference there in the way in which we tried to defend. And I'm not digging Silt out for 1 minute, but his decision making was off a little bit. His passing was off a little bit. And it probably made the rest of the back four that little bit edgier. And threw them all off. Like we said, they've probably practiced those patterns of play with Ronaldo, Alderete, Ballard, and Hume, and the goalkeeper all week, and all of a sudden that's out the window. So again, there seems to be a lot of little reasons, and the cumulative effect of that has resulted in the final result today. Like you said, though, hopefully it's just a minor thing, and he's not out for too long. But what it does also highlight is we desperately need somebody else to come through the door.
Yeah, and I totally agree as well with Silt. I don't think he did much wrong when he came on. He certainly wasn't making howler after howler, but he can't fill the role that Ballard specifically plays as well, because I think Ballard is so comfortable at stepping out to meet attackers, and he loves that little lunge in front and just nick a toe on the ball before you can get turned, which obviously is high risk, but he's so good at it that it becomes a stock option. And I think you could see a couple of times, particularly soon after he came on, Seal lunged in for one and gave a free kick away. And I just thought that's a ball Ballard wins because it's not Seal's game, is it?
Yeah, I think that's what I meant when I was saying some of his decision making, and like I said, I'm not digging him out. It certainly wasn't a bad performance, but it wasn't Dan Ballard, basically.
Yeah, it was a tactical issue, I think.
Yeah.
And so those were the sort of two headline moments in the first half from a Sunderland point of view. The two only real pieces of quality in the half, there was one for us and one for Burnley. Burnley obviously score off their moment. You know, I'm sure people don't want us to dissect the goal in too much detail, hear about it all again. But you know, that little flick layoff. Was it Anthony who played it
for their goal?
For their goal,
yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think it was that little sort of just flick back through the legs that Anthony played to drop it into Cullen's path, who obviously then takes the touch, and it's a good finish.
It is a good finish. Yeah, it is a good finish.
And you've got to give credit. I do think that was a really well worked bit of play from Burnley. If you're being uber critical, I think you could Sealed possibly read that slightly earlier and get across to make a block sooner. Maybe. Could one of the midfielders have dropped in and seen that space a little bit earlier? Maybe. But for me, I think that's more of a case of hats off to Burnley for a well-worked goal. But I don't know how you saw it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't too dissimilar. When it went in, I was like, okay, that's a good finish. Watched it a couple of times, obviously, on the replay. I do feel Cullen gets the ball probably a little bit too easy. Yeah. And we should be probably a little bit closer to him. And it does kind of blindside Roofs a little bit because it almost kind of goes between Alderete and Lyle Foster, I think it was. So he's a little bit blindsided, but it's right in the corner. It's a great finish. I just think we probably should have been a bit closer to him, and he doesn't have the time to place that into the corner. But yeah, it's a good finish. Can't take anything away from him. And they, at that point in the game, they probably deserved it as well because they that second half in particular, they did kind of grow into it a little bit more.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, we've not really talked about it at all, but there was the VAR decision as well in the first half to disallow a Burnley goal, which I think was probably the right decision in the end.
Yeah, 100%.
Seal gets a push in the back and goes down. That's where they get the ball from and score the goal. So, I don't think you can have too many complaints. And even, the Burnley fans in the ground didn't seem to be booting off about it or anything. No. And you can normally tell if the whole ground goes up, something dodgy's gone on. But
I don't think there's any questions with that one. And on the commentary as well, they were saying, even before the decision was made, that'll be chalked off. Yeah. And it was a foul. It was a foul. Anywhere else on the pitch, it's a foul. Whether it results in a goal or not doesn't change the fact.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the last moment of note in the first half was obviously Chemsden Talby was played through 1-on-1 by Adingra, and it was a very narrow angle. Tries to lift the ball just over the keeper, and credit to Talby, to be fair. I think he's wrong foot as well. It's quite a nice, delicate little attempted finish, but just goes. It's one of those where it's always slightly curling away from the goal and just goes about half a yard wide. I will say, though, I thought that was a really, really nice, smart pass from Adingra in that move, who got very little joy all game until he went off. I thought he was, Burnley played him quite well. But that's, a nice little citer of things that are to come from this team once they start to click.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we need to remember is this team has been together for, a few weeks. And for all the social media posts that we see from the club that are brilliant, but are of a team that's, all best mates and all together and in it as one. I've got no doubt that they are, but they still don't really know each other yet. They don't really know each other's strengths and weaknesses and how people prefer to play. They all know how, or they're getting to know how Regis wants them to play, but how they all interact with each other is still a learning curve. And the Talby chance, it was a good one. Again, a slightly sliding doors moment. It's almost the opposite of Cullen's, where his is turning away from the goal rather than into it. And on another day, that might go across the keeper, find the bottom corner, and we're talking about a Sunderland victory or at least a point rather than a disappointing 2-0 defeat.
Yeah, 100%. And then you've already touched on this just before, but I think, that first half, by and large, was a pretty even contest. There was little in it in terms of quality from either side. We've obviously discussed the big moments, but the second half obviously doesn't start well for Sunderland. Burnley are are a goal up within a few minutes.
Mm.
And I think that just set the tone for me of what we then saw for the remainder of the game, which was that Burnley seemed pretty comfortable almost all the time. And I think we really struggled just to get any sort of rhythm going. And good segue from what you were just saying as well about the team needing time to gel and learn the way that each other plays. I thought there were a lot of times, particularly when we were trying to build up down the left-hand side, and especially after Enzo Lefebvre came on, who obviously was deployed on the left wing again as he was when he came on against West Ham. There were a lot of times where Lefebvre would have the ball and he'd be slowly kind of, approaching the back four, and he's clearly waiting for an overlap.
Yeah.
That just never comes.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing Dennis Serkin would have been doing. He'd have been looking for that immediately because he knows that's, the way that we want to play. And I just thought it was pretty glaring, particularly on that side, I think, because you've got the double whammy of obviously the players haven't played together a lot and Lefebvre's out of position. I thought, that's where it really became obvious. And we just by and large generally struggled to sort of string passes together at any rate of pace to try and unsettle Burnley. Everything was very in front of them and very side to side. Is that fair?
Yeah. 100%. It felt very championship, I think, in our approach. And I'm not saying that it was a championship level performance, but in terms of tactically, how we went about attacking play, it was very championship, where we were getting a little bit frustrated as fans, where we were seeing sideways passes along the midfield, back to the defence, sideways passes. And then we get into a position where we start to enter their final third out on the left or the right, and then go backwards or go back inside, which wasn't the case. We didn't see that at all against West Ham. And you were talking about the overlaps, and it's a good observation to make because, again, last Saturday against West Ham, Ronaldo was overlapping time and time again, or at least being an option on the edge of the final third to have a little lay back to and then cross in or put the ball back square to Diarra or to Xhaka. So that option just wasn't there. And I think we all fell into a bit of a trap in thinking that right-hand side of Burnley was going to be a weakness because they had a 30-odd-year-old Kyle Walker in there. And thinking that, we were very, very naive. Regardless of his age, is still a former world-class, at one point best right-back in the world level defender in there. So just because he's that little bit older and possibly a little bit slower, don't get me wrong, a slow Kyle Walker is still quicker than 75% of the people in the Premier League.
He could give me a foot race,
sure. Exactly. And I think we forgot that because he's decided to sign for Burnley, and it felt a little bit of a sunset on a career type move. But he kept Adingra quiet for the most part, and he kept Lefebvre under wraps for the most part as well. And those are. Well, Adingra, obviously, 60-odd Premier League appearances under his belt, and Lefebvre, one of our most attacking, exciting prospects. And he dealt with them with barely breaking a sweat, it didn't look like. So credit to them. And the other thing, Johnny, is that let's not forget how good Burnley were defensively last season. Yeah. All right, that might come unstuck when they play the more elite teams in the division, but we still struggled against them last season. They're still set up in the exact same way. So for us to think that we're going to turn up at Turf Moor and score 2 or 3 this week, again, was quite naive. I'd have taken a 0-0, I'd have taken a 1-1. Again, disappointing with the end result, but I think hopefully we'll reflect back on it and appreciate that Burnley actually were pretty good. For all we weren't at the races compared to last week. Burnley is still a good defensive team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, it is important to remember that, they've lost James Trafford, and I think they've lost CJ Egan-Riley as well, haven't they? But they've still got Scott Parker, and as good of, as high of a level of quality as the defenders and the goalkeeper were last season in the Championship, in my opinion at least anyway, 70%, if not more, of a team's defensive ability comes from the training ground and from the coaching. And the fact that they've still got the same man in charge obviously is going to help them defensively. So I totally agree. I think we probably were all a little bit naive and riding a bit too high from last week. I'm not saying the players were or anything, but as a fan base, probably. Yeah. I'd have taken a 0-0 before the game or any sort of draw. I always think a point away from home is massively important. And just the last thing before we move on and start talking bigger picture and context, I thought, towards the end of the game, I didn't think Lebris got his substitutions right. Not necessarily in terms of the personnel, but it felt to me much more desperate than usual. Whereas whenever Lebris makes substitutions, generally you can see what he's going for. He's tinkering, or there's an idea behind moving a player out of position. I mean, the poster child of this is Lafay dropping deep in the playoff final and then, having an absolute worldie.
Yeah.
This time I thought, Isidore came on instead of Mark Gue as the first change up front, which I found a little strange, bearing in mind how often we were trying to cross the ball. And I thought Trey Hume, actually, to give a little bit of credit for us going forward, I thought some of the crosses Hume put in at various points in the game were very inviting. And on another day, again, we connect with one of those and we're laughing. But it seems strange to me to bring Isidore on over Gue when Gue is a 6'2", handful. And when he did eventually come on, I actually thought he caused one or two issues in the Burnley penalty area.
Yeah.
But yeah, Isidore coming on first to me was a little strange. And just generally there was a bit of a lack of joined up thinking. I mean, is that an area of concern, or do you think it was just a one-off where he's got?
No, it's not an area of. You can't call it an area of concern after one defeat, and there's more than enough credit in the bank with Lebris in terms of his changes in his tactical decisions. We all slated him the last 6 games of the season last season and thought he didn't know what he was doing, and then look at the performances we turned out in the playoffs, and the substitutions he made in the first home game against West Ham were spot on and what was needed to see the game through. This week, I agree with you. He did get it wrong. No, get it wrong is probably the wrong thing to say, because I'm not sure what I would have done differently.
But they certainly didn't come off, did they?
But they didn't seem like they were tactical decisions. It just seemed like, I'm going to put a new person in that position and see if they can do better than the person that's coming off, rather than try and change something fundamentally to win the game, relying on an individual substitute performance, I guess. The only thing, and I will echo what you said, Isidore and Gue, when you're away to a team that can defend as resolutely and as organised as Burnley are, you need a handful. You need someone who's going to ruffle a few feathers and maybe not come up with a goal or an assist themselves, but can pull people in different ways that might have opened up a space for Lafay, or might have got the first ball on one of those Trey Hume crosses, and someone else picks up the second ball and puts it away. So yeah, I was surprised that we didn't see. I was surprised we didn't see him earlier. I would have said, I guess timing is all hindsight, isn't it? But maybe have Gue on a little bit earlier. I can't remember how long after the second goal went in we made those changes, but certainly I would assume before we even kicked off after the second goal went in, I would have probably brought him on for Mayenda, because it was quite clearly not happening and we needed something different. But yeah, not as effective, but certainly not an area of concern, not at this stage, mate.
Yeah, no, I agree, to be fair. I think it's just one of those where, as you say, it was very much just change the body and hope the new man.
And hope they perform better than the person they've come on for.
Exactly. And on that sort of topic, actually, so the game's happened. We've lost the game. That can happen. It's the Premier League. You're going to lose games. And crucially as well, I don't think we were terrible or anything. Burnley weren't outplaying us and knocking it round and the fans all in. It was a tight game, and they've taken their chances and we haven't taken ours. There are going to be games this season where it's the exact opposite story. Somebody's missed 2 or 3 sitters against us. We've nicked one near the end and we've come away with 3 points and we're absolutely laughing. So I think, there's no need for anybody to panic. There's no need for, toys out of the pram and mass changes for the next game. But I would say it does just give us maybe a bit of a shot in the arm to say, look, you're not quite there yet. Things still need to happen. In terms of trying to bring on that attacking fluidity and nurture those relationships, obviously we need time on the training pitch, and you mentioned not having so many Saturday Tuesdays will be a big thing. We've also got personnel who are missing, not to forget that Romain Mundle's obviously still out injured. We've mentioned Dennis Sirkin. There are other names who are to come back, which will all help. But from now, are you looking at it and thinking we want to make some changes and try some new things out? Or do you think that actually we want to take that as a learning experience and stick with the team for another week or two and hope these things try and develop. You know, because with us having such a front-loaded start in terms of winnable games on paper, you know, to what degree can we balance bringing on those relationships with, actually, we just need to get a few points?
I think, again, I don't think we necessarily need to change it, and I don't think Lebris will change it. You know, it's been quite clear from quite early on in pre-season who his preferred starting 11 is, possibly 12, and you might swap one for another. So I don't think we will see a change, and I don't necessarily think that we should. You know, that midfield three has been brilliant, regardless of results, throughout pre-season. They were fantastic against West Ham. Adingra probably had his best game for us against West Ham. It was quiet this week. Talby, again, probably had a not as good a game as he did at West Ham, but certainly better than he was in pre-season, so I wouldn't necessarily change him. The only question might be, do you next week swap out Mayenda and maybe start Gu or start Isidore? Because, you know, if we're being frank, if that header from Mayenda hadn't gone in, and you could make an argument that it possibly shouldn't have gone in from that distance out. There's not many headers that are scored in the Premier League from 13 yards out. Then we probably would be calling for a change, because he has missed a lot of chances and he has been out of games for long periods of time. Going back to pre-season, obviously I'm not stupid enough to base these judgments on 180 minutes of Premier League football. But, you know, a home game to Brentford is a different prospect. That's, again, given the context of what we know, or how bad we know West Ham are now. So it probably does need a change. Brentford's back line is quite a physical one, so maybe it does need a Q, with Adingra and Talby either side getting in behind and him looking to win flick-ons from counter-attacks. I know Lebris probably won't want to do that, given that it is a home game. But to come back to your question, I don't see there being a need for a change, other than if Ballard's out for any period of time, and we have to bring Seal in to play alongside Alderete, or possibly, you know, if we sign somebody else early this week, there may be a case for them to start. But, you know, having Alderete and John Lucimi, let's say, starting, who've barely got 2 appearances between them, is a bit of a risk for a home tie. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting next week, but I don't anticipate changes. It would smack a little bit of panic stations unnecessarily if there were too many unforced changes to that starting 11.
And we obviously, as well, we have another game between now and then, don't we? We've got Huddersfield in the Cup on Tuesday night, so that'll be an opportunity for somebody who we've not mentioned as well, you know, in the potential absence of Ballard. Nordi Mukele, who's come in, obviously can play that position. Wasn't in the squad today, presumably just, you know, a timing
too soon for him.
Yeah. But he's got, you know, more than likely we're going to see an entirely changed team for that game. So the potential for him and a couple of the other lads who are obviously looking to try and build up bits of fitness and for everybody to try and establish the relationships. We've got that opportunity between now and the next Premier League game. So, you know, a chance for us as a club to hopefully try and brush this aside and forget about it and, you know, get back to winning ways, which could be important between now and next week. But speaking of next week's game, obviously this is mainly a reaction pod, but just as a brief, you know, what's the score, where are we at? Obviously, like you say, West Ham last week, 3-0, brilliant win. Doesn't look quite as impressive off the back of their showing on Friday night. But that suits us, another team shipping 5 goals and being
absolutely
to the bottom of the table. In terms of today's other results, a good result for us with Bournemouth beating Wolves 1-0. Not the best result is Brentford beating Aston Villa 1-0, because I think a lot of people, myself included, have probably tipped Brentford for a bit of a more difficult season with the transition they're going through, but obviously pulling off a pretty good result against a good team in Aston Villa. So with that in mind, we're 2 games in, we've got 3 points, we've got a potentially winnable home game. You'd have taken this before the season kicked off, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. Of course you would, because before we knew how bad West Ham were, we were hoping.
We'll just keep making that point, by the way. West
Yeah,
Ham
yeah, yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. I really worry. I know this is we're not really bothered about West Ham because if they struggle, then it means it's slightly easier for us to stay up. But I think they will really struggle this season unless they get rid of Potter relatively quickly and bring someone in who can steady that ship. Let's hope not, because it's one less relegation place that we have to fight for. But you're right. The Brentford result was a surprise. Not so much a surprise, I guess, but a disappointment because, like you, I thought Brentford would, given that they lost pretty much the spine of their team when you take into account Flecken and Norgard and Mbuemo all leaving. I thought they would struggle more than they appear to be in these first two games. Villa haven't been great. They've lost players and not really signed anybody. So it remains to be seen what kind of context that result is. But yeah, Wolves losing again. And West Ham, sorry, don't know why we've spoken about them enough. I don't know why the name suddenly left my mind. Struggling with that considered, even a point against Brentford. If you went into those first three games of the season and said, look, you're going to get 4 points from those first three games of the season, we'd all be happy with that. Obviously, expectations change given that first game of the season. But before a ball was kicked, if someone said to you, you're going to win one, draw one, lose one in your first three games, we'd be like, yeah, brilliant. And if we just carry that trend on, we'd be more than fine this season. We'd be touching on the 40 to 50 points. I think as we sit here 45 minutes or so after the final whistle, whilst we're recording, it feels a bit disappointing. But, if we carry on our home form, if we carry on the level of home performance that we showed against West Ham, regardless of what they were like, we'll get something from that Brentford game. And if it's a win, all of a sudden 6 points from three games is your 2 points per game average, and we're talking a mid-table finish. Hopefully with other players to come in and with the squad as a collective unit just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So there's plenty to be optimistic about. I'd still expect to see the Stadium of Light absolutely bouncing next week for the Brentford game. And I expect it to help get the extra 10, 15% out of those players. And don't be surprised if we see another 1-0, 2-0 win and a clean sheet and everybody's happy again.
That's an excellent amount of positivity to just about end the show on. I think you've done extremely well to pull that out after watching that.
We're back
game.
Full circle, mate. We're back.
Yeah, that's it. We're class again. We're going to win the league.
HMS Piss the League is fully operational again.
But yeah, I mean, just, I totally echo what you've just said. I think you look at the first two games, and if you just swap them round, mm-hmm. and you beat Burnley away and you lose against West Ham at home, in a weird way, I think some people would almost be happier because, it's
what would be expected, I guess.
Yeah.
Without the context of West Ham's last two games.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, it's important to remember points away from home in the Premier League are extremely difficult to come by. And even though we've lost the game today, that's not to say that that's a yardstick of where we are quality-wise. I think even in seasons where we've stayed up, we've won maybe 9-10 points away from home in a full season. So, yeah, like you say, we've got a perfect chance next weekend to put ourselves back on track and right the wrongs of today against Brentford. And fingers crossed, like you say, get the stadium full, get the atmosphere going, and hopefully send 49,000 people home pretty happy. Happier than the couple of thousand hardy souls who made the journey to Turf Moor this afternoon anyway.
Absolutely.
Right, but yeah, I think we'll pretty much end it there. I don't really want to talk about us getting beat anymore. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining me, Bomber.
Very welcome, Johnny. Pleasure as always, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you very much to the listeners for joining us and commiserating for half an hour or so with us after that game. As usual, obviously, keep your ear to the ground for more content from us every single day. However, the podcast is posting at least once every single day, if not twice when things go haywire, which with Sunderland, there's always a potential for that to happen. So there'll be some more post-match stuff tomorrow, I think, and there should be an On This Week on Monday. So keep your ear out for that. Keep your eyes peeled for more content on the normal website on rokerreport.sbnation.com, where we'll have all of the usual written fare for you there. And yeah, for today, that's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.